In this video we're going to make a heart rate style monitor using Unity's particle effect. First of all, we're going to add a particle effect to the scene. We do this by right clicking in the hierarchy, going to Effects and selecting Particle System. And this will just add the default particle system, but what we'll do first is change this so it's a green line that fades and moves from left to right. So first of all, let's change some of the properties here in the particle system. On the right, if you click emission, we'll change the rate over time to 0.4. Then we'll change the emission shape under shape, and we'll leave it as cone, but we'll make the radius quite small. We'll make it 0.1. And then in the particle itself, we'll change the start speed to 0. We're going to change that later on. We'll set the start lifetime to 0.7. And we'll set the start size to 0.2. And we also want the heart rate to have that green on black effect that you'll see on most sort of medical type ones. So we'll change the start color to sort of darkish green. So at the moment nothing's really happening. The particle's being generated. It's not moving because we've set the start speed to 0, and after a while it's disappearing. So what we're going to do now is change the velocity over time. And first we're just going to make it so it moves from left to right across the screen. So we're going to select in the options on the right, velocity over time, enable that, and you can see the different properties of X, Y and Z, and at the right here there's a little drop down, we'll change it to curve, and if you select on the X, that's selected all, but we'll just select X at the moment so that's coloured, and you should see at the bottom particle system curves. And this is the speed, or the velocity rather, in the direction over the lifetime of our particle. So what we can do is set this to 1, and there's an easy way to do it. There's some presets along the bottom here. If you click on the one on the left, it will change that to 1. So you should see now the particle is generated and it moves from left to right across the screen. What we'll also do is reset the transform of our particle system so we can see it in the main camera. So if we on transform, click the 3 dots and reset, and if we just have a look at it now, you'll see there's a particle being generated and it will move slightly from left to right and then it will disappear. So we can tweak the lifetime, and what we want is for that to last for pretty much the duration of the width of the screen. So we put it to 0.7 just to get things working. Let's change that to 7 and see how it goes. Okay, and I actually want the particles to move a bit faster, so on the X here, if we change that to 3, let's have a look at that. And you see they're making it across the screen, so that's what we want. So we'll change that lifetime to 7, and we'll change the velocity on the X. So again, this is our X graph, we'll change that to 3. So we have a particle moving from left to right, and what we want to do is add a trail to that. So there's a sort of line following that as it goes along. And if we go down on the right here, and you should see trails down towards the bottom, if we enable that, by default it will be this this purple line, and this is because, and you can see it says here, we don't have a material assigned for that trails. So if we go down to the options here in renderer, and you can see it currently says none, we're going to click here and just select default line. So if we hit play now, you should see the particles are generated, and then what follows is just a thick line, the same color as the particle. So that's a little bit thick for us. So what we want to do back in the trails section, we'll change the properties here. So we want to change the lifetime of the trail. It's lasting a little bit long, so we'll change that to 0.5. And then we also want to set the width of the trail. So width of the trail here, and we'll set that to 0.1. We want it to be quite thin. So let's just press play here now and see what we've got. There we go. So we've got a dot and then the line following it. So you can see the lines are actually joining up with each other, so there's no gap in between the particles there. What we want to do to change that, if we have a look here, we can change the color over trail. So you can set it as a gradient in the right here. If you click on the drop down, and we'll select gradient. And if we click on there, we can change the color at the start and end. Now it's currently inheriting the color from the particle itself. So if you hit the little arrow here on the top right, and we're going to bring the alpha of that all the way down. So you can see it's blending from solid color to fully transparent. Okay, so we have our line set up and we have a bit of a fade on that, and we can tweak those values to how we want it to look exactly a bit later. What we'll do now is set up the sort of the heartbeat style rhythm. So if you go back into velocity over time, we're finished with the X, so we will deselect that and we'll select Y. Now this is where we're going to set the Y velocity during the lifetime of the particle. So we want a motion that sort of goes up and then down in quite a sharp manner. So if we just make this a bit bigger, you can add keys to this by double clicking. So if we double click here, and you can see in the particle, you'll see as we change this, you can alter the velocity of the particle at this point. So if we put it to 0.5, it will have a constant 0.5 velocity in the negative y direction. So you'll see they'll sort of sweep down and then it will come back up to 0. You can see that happening across the lifetime of the particle. Now the kind of shape we want, and again, you can tweak this to exactly how you want it. But I want it to kind of come in straight for a little bit and then go sharply up. And we'll get the exact setup here, but we want it to go sort of half up our scale very sharply, and then we'll add another key here and we want it to go down to all the way down to our lower value of the scale here, and then we want to come all the way back up. Now the reason we want to go back up is because we want the line to come back to this sort of 0 point, so it comes back to the straight. And you can see it's not really doing much here, it's sort of a bit of a dip. But we'll add another key here, and we'll come back to 0. Now if we want that to sort of sharply tail off to flat again, we can right click on the key, change it to flat, and you can see there it sort of goes flat again after that point. Now it's not really much of a dip here, it is happening, but the amplitude of our Y velocity here isn't very strong. So let's change that to something a little bit sharper. Let's try putting that to 20. You can see there we've got a more sharp movement. I'm actually going to put that to 30 and see how that looks. And you can see we're not coming back to 0, so we can tweak the values here and get that exactly in the shape that we want it to be. That looks about right. So let's play and see how that looks. So we've got the line coming on, bit of a dip, and there we go. So you can play around with the values in there. So I'll just tweak that a little bit and then show you the resulting graph. So this is one I've made as a prefab, and I want it to repeat twice. So we'll set that off. And you can see it comes up, does it sort of up and down, and it does that twice, and then it'll fade off from the edge. So if we zoom in, you can see this is the sort of shape that we've, and you can, like I say, you can tweak this to get exactly the shape that you want, but the result from this graph shape that we've got is this nice sort of heart rate effect over the screen, and then the particle will reach the end and dive out of the screen. You see the trail is fading as we go. So that's how you can make a heart rate style monitor in Unity using the particle system. And you could use this for any sort of computer readout, any sort of oscilloscope type thing. You can play around with the values in the X and Y curves to get whatever shape graph you want.